The Buddha said, "The way of cultivation is not found outside, but cultivated within." Lin Wuchan spent his entire life practicing in a temple, reciting sutras day after day. Yet he never once touched that peaceful wisdom within the heart. The pursuit of external forms and numbers ultimately led him into confusion and bewilderment. Today, through Lin Wuchan's story of practice, we will explore the true meaning of the Buddha's teachings. The profundity of Buddhism does not lie in accumulating numbers, but in the purification of the mind. True cultivation is about letting go of all attachments and returning to inner peace and awakening. In a quiet ancient town far from the bustle of the world, where the four seasons unfold like poetry and lush mountains and clear water surround, one could often spot Lin Wuxian's figure at an old temple. That temple had long been in disrepair, its roof tiles covered with moss. The bell tower's chime was deep and distant, each toll reverberating in the heart, instantly bringing serenity. From a young age, Lin Wuchan had a profound connection to Buddhism. When he was a child, his parents passed away early, and he was raised by his grandfather. His grandfather was a well-known monk in the town, preaching the Dharma daily with a gentle tone, yet an undeniable firmness. Young Lin Wuchan would often, in the still of the night, secretly take those heavy Buddhist scriptures from his grandfather's bookshelf. As he opened line after line of ancient text, an unprecedented sense of calm and longing would well up within him. He vowed that he would be like his grandfather, cultivating a mind of tranquility, transcending worldly attachments, and moving toward liberation. However, despite pouring all his energy into Buddhism, he had not found the enlightenment he expected. Every morning, when the first rays of sunlight filtered through the branches into the temple, he would rise. From dawn until dusk, he silently recited the Buddha's name, always with his prayer beads in hand, never letting his focus waver. When the bell tolled, he would sit solemnly in a corner of the temple hall, reciting the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, silently imploring the Dharma in his heart. Each time he chanted the Buddha's name, it seemed to merge with the air, gently dispersing around him. Yet gradually he realized his inner emptiness remained unfilled. The path of cultivation became even more obscure. Whenever he closed his eyes to meditate, his mind filled with a kaleidoscope of distracting thoughts. The Buddha's name grew distant, unable to truly penetrate his heart. Even with the most devout chanting, he always felt an indescribable sense of loss, as though no matter how hard he tried, he could not touch the true gate that led to the Dharma. Often late at night, he would sit alone by the window, listening to the sounds of insects outside as he gazed blankly at the bright moon. The moonlight, clear and pure, fell across his face without bringing any comfort. The void and confusion in his heart deepened, as though the path of cultivation was shrouded by a perpetual mist. He wandered within it, unable to find a genuine way forward. The townspeople said that Lin Wuchen was a devout practitioner, but none knew of the indescribable emptiness and anxiety he carried in his heart. He even began to doubt whether he had missed something along the way, whether he had been drifting in confusion all this time. Sometimes he would go to the mountain behind the temple, sitting on a stone bench, letting the wind brush past his ears, closing his eyes to focus on the gentle rustling of leaves. He often fantasized that in some sudden moment, insight might descend from the heavens, dispelling the fog in his mind. Yet this fantasy would vanish as swiftly as it arose, carried away by the wind. He gradually sank deeper into his struggle. Why was he practicing so diligently day after day? Had he lost himself somewhere unknown? By this point, Lin Wuchan had silently resolved to find a way to unravel his confusion, even if that path was fraught with uncertainty and doubt. He had no idea where it might lead, but he felt compelled to follow it in search of a genuine glimmer of light. Despite his inner turmoil, he never slackened in his cultivation. Day after day, like a monk driven by mission, he immersed himself in his own world. He knew that only through persistent effort could he truly draw near the depths of the Dharma. He would not allow any distractions. When the first morning light appeared, he would rise from bed and begin his meditation and chanting. The resonance of the Buddha's name echoed in his ears like an unending ritual. To increase his efficiency in practice, Lin Wuchan began to fixate on the number of times he chanted the Buddha's name. Each day he set higher and higher targets, 5,000, 8,000, even tens of thousands. He skillfully turned the beads between his fingertips, his lips never pausing as he repeated over and over, Namo Amitabha Buddha. He believed that the more times he chanted, the closer he would be to the Buddha, hastening his breakthrough from the fog in his heart toward genuine insight. To make his cultivation even more thorough, Lin Wuchen started using earphones to play pre-recorded chants of the Buddha's name, flooding his mind with the sound of chanting. He imagined that such an intense environment would allow him to communicate with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas more effectively. To further amplify the effect, he pasted signs bearing the Buddha's name all around the temple, on the walls, on the pillars, even in the corners of the corridors. These words of the Buddha's name filled the air like waves, seemingly touching his very soul wherever he went. Each time he left the main hall, he felt he could sense the fruits of his devotion. He believed his adherence to chanting far exceeded that of all other practitioners. News of his diligent progress often spread throughout the temple. Some even said, Lin Wuchen truly is a role model in the temple. His daily chanting resounds so powerfully that even the birds in the sky must hear his sincerity. Yet despite his unwavering efforts, his mind remained unsettled. Whenever he closed his eyes to meditate, stray thoughts flooded in like the tide, impossible to hold back. That once familiar chant seemed to deplete all inner calm, making his mind even more restless. Even when he stood in the center of the temple, surrounded by his own recorded chanting, he could not escape the turmoil within. Late at night, he would still feel loneliness and emptiness. That indescribable void clung to him like a shadow. Although his chanting grew louder and more frequent, each utterance of the Buddha's name seemed to lose its original meaning. He began to wonder, what was he really seeking? Was it sheer quantity or genuine peace of mind? Each night, he sat in the corner of the temple hall, listening to the recorded chanting, his gaze empty and distant. Though the environment around him was filled with echoes of the Buddha's name, his inner being remained silent. He started to suspect he was trapped in an inescapable cycle, overly focused on external forms and quantities, and thus missing the true essence of practice. At times he felt lost in a sea of chanting, his heart growing increasingly agitated and restless, torn by the incessant repetition. He realized that despite chanting every day, his anxiety had not disappeared. It had instead intensified. Whenever he concentrated on the number of recitations, he lost the true meaning of chanting, the silent, formless state of mindfulness and clarity, not a cacophony of noise and discord. Slowly, Lin Wuchen's heart grew heavier. He sensed he had entered a dead end. Perhaps he should pause and reflect on his path of cultivation. Over the years, it felt as if he had been rushing towards some distant goal, yet he had never truly experienced the peace and wisdom he sought. His confusion deepened. Each recitation of the Buddha's name seemed to remind him that he was drifting further from the genuine Dharma he pursued. It was at this time he heard that a wandering master would soon visit the nearby Lin village. Rumor had it this master was adept at guiding practitioners out of their predicaments, able to perceive the hidden struggles within each person and provide a clear path forward. Without hesitation and filled with anticipation and excitement, Lin Wuchan decided to seek this master's help. He imagined that as soon as the master saw him, he would immediately perceive his inner confusion and lead him out of the fog of practice. Along the way, he silently pictured how, if the master offered him guidance, He would surely overcome many obstacles and reach a new level in his cultivation. Eagerly and almost unconsciously, he quickened his pace, as though every step brought him closer to liberation. At last he arrived at the ancient temple. It was every bit as solemn and dignified as he had imagined. The air was fragrant with sandalwood incense, and threads of light streamed through the windows of the main hall, illuminating the ancient stone floor and lending the space a sacred aura. Dense incense smoke rose, its curling fragrance connecting the human world to the heavenly realms and inspiring profound reverence. Entering the temple, he saw the master sitting quietly in a meditation room, eyes closed in repose. The master's posture resembled that of a Buddha statue, peaceful in expression. There was no trace of intimidation, only a natural aura that compelled people to pay homage. Feeling an invisible force drawing him in, Lin Wuchan spontaneously took a few steps forward, suddenly becoming nervous, as though the master's gaze could penetrate his every secret. Softly he knelt, bringing his palms together respectfully. "Master," said Lin Wuchen, "I am a practitioner who has chanted the Buddha's name day and night for many years. Yet despite my unwavering effort, I still feel empty within, unable to truly grasp the meaning of chanting. Whenever I meditate, countless distractions fill my mind. Though I chant clearly and loudly, it brings me neither peace nor wisdom. I have brought my practice journal in the hope of receiving your guidance." With these words, he took out a thick notebook from his robe and handed it to the master. Page after page recorded his daily counts of Buddha name recitations, his times and progress, all meticulously noted like a lesson plan. He thought this would demonstrate how earnestly he had worked on the path of cultivation. The master smiled gently, took the notebook, and flipped through a few pages, his gaze sweeping across the writing. Watching him, Lin Wuchan felt a subtle tension, coupled with a hope that the master would acknowledge his diligence. After a moment, the master looked up at him, speaking in a mild tone, but with deep significance. "You recite the Buddha's name day after day. Indeed, each recitation seems to echo far and wide. But have you ever asked yourself, are you chanting the Buddha's name, or are you chanting numbers? Do you seek the Buddha within your heart, or are you simply trying to prove how diligent you are?" Surprised, Lin Wuchen hesitated. He had not expected the master's opening words to be so direct. He lowered his head, somewhat ashamed. I always believed that the more I chanted, the closer I would be to the Dharma. And if I chanted loudly, the Buddhas would more clearly hear my devotion." The master's gaze grew more profound, as though seeing the confusion in Lin Wuchen's heart. Quantity and volume are but external aspects of cultivation. The true Dharma lies in the mind. Standing up quietly, the master continued in a soft voice. "You must understand that the number of recitations is not the key. The key is whether you can let go of your attachments and focus wholeheartedly. You have poured your time and energy into numbers, forgetting what chanting really means. Consider, each repetition of the Buddha's name should arise from inner stillness and realization, not from external noise or chaos." Hearing this, a profound stirring arose within Lin Wuchan, as if he'd never before been so acutely aware of his own error. Instinctively, he bowed his head, feeling like a traveler lost in a boundless desert. The master's words were like a beam of light cutting through the fog before his eyes. "Cultivation does not exist for the sake of numbers," the master continued, "but for the sake of mental peace. Your obsession with external forms has led you astray. The essence of chanting lies not in how many times you recite the Buddha's name, but whether you can truly perceive and embody the compassion and wisdom of the Buddha in each recitation." It felt as though a dream had ended. The perplexities that had troubled him for so long seemed to find answers in the master's counsel. He bowed his head in silent contemplation, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude and remorse. The master's words were like a bolt from the blue, striking at his greatest blind spot. He had always believed the path he'd chosen was correct, but now he finally saw that his goals and outward practices had led him astray, away from the pure connection of the heart. Observing him, the master spoke again, calmly. You came here not only to practice, but to seek that inner peace and truth. The errors you've made are precisely why you remain unable to find inner tranquility. With these words, a deep sense of shame and unease spread through Lin Wuchen's heart. He lowered his head, reviewing every action along his path. He had thought of cultivation as a task to be measured by effort and numbers, milestones to quantify his results. Little did he realize his pursuit of Buddhism had morphed into an obsession with external forms, losing its original purity. Master, his voice quivered, unable to complete the thought. Each time he tried to speak, fresh waves of guilt and confusion rose within him. How could years of practice be so hollow? Why had all his efforts led him further from peace? The master, not rushing to comfort him, waited quietly for him to process his inner turmoil. After a while, the master spoke once more. First mistake, clinging to numbers and forms. You have seen this yourself. You focus on how many times you chant, yet ignore the state of your own mind. The key to chanting is mental focus, not the number of recitations. If you can chant even once with no stray thoughts, wholeheartedly and sincerely, that alone is sufficient. The Buddha's name is merely a tool to guide you back to your innate purity. Clenching his hands together, Lin Wuchen felt the depth of the master's words. Yes, he had never truly paused to listen to the essence behind each recitation, mechanically repeating them in the belief that numbers equaled progress. Now he realized that true practice had to begin with the mind's sincere engagement. Second mistake, neglecting inner focus. The master continued, you can count your recitations, yet your thoughts are still scattered. The crux of practice is neither speed nor quantity, but peace and concentration. Each recitation should be quiet and profound, like the gentle trickling of a mountain spring, undisturbed by anything outside. If you remain restless, how could you ever grasp the true realm of the Dharma? Closing his eyes, Lin Wuchen recalled his daily chanting, rushing, full of numbers, drowning in repetition, a cycle that had sapped his calm. He realized he had never really settled his mind to comprehend the wisdom behind the Buddha's name. The master's gaze grew more intense. Third mistake, arrogance. Ask yourself whether, in everything you do, every chant, there lurks a desire to display this to others. Has your journey turned into a chance to show off your diligence? Arrogance is the enemy of practice, for it clouds genuine wisdom. You used loudspeakers to play the Buddha's name, not just for your own inner peace, but so that everyone would witness your devotion. The path of cultivation is only known to your own heart. Others need not know. His words were like bolts of lightning striking the most vulnerable recesses of Lin Wuchen's mind. Yes, he had taken pride in his practice. Unknowingly, it had become a performance, a display of diligence for all to see. His arrogance had blinded him to the true meaning of the Dharma, distancing him from the original purpose of his practice. At last, he could hold back no longer. Tears welled in his eyes, filled with shame and regret. It felt as if all the splendor he had built crumbled at once, revealing the emptiness of his long years of cultivation. He bowed his head, his expression overcome with remorse, yet his heart felt as though layers of fog were being lifted. Master, His voice choked, unable to continue. In this moment, he fully understood that the path he had trodden was perilously off course, all because of his unexamined restlessness and attachments. Seeing his reaction, the master smiled gently, his gaze as calm as flowing water. Every person's cultivation is a journey from confusion to awakening. Recognizing your errors is the most important step. Remember, Buddhism is not for external show, but for inner purification. When your mind is at peace, each recitation of the Buddha's name naturally carries its true meaning. The path of practice always lies in your own heart. A surge of emotion welled up in Lin Wuchan's heart as he listened. Each sentence felt like cool water, replenishing a long-parched spirit. He suddenly realized that what he had been pursuing all this time was not the Dharma itself, but an external form and a kind of vanity. True cultivation is not measured by how many times one chants, but by the depth of one's inner transformation. Softly he said, his voice resolute, "Master, I understand now." Indeed, practice should not be about proving how diligent I am, but about returning the mind to tranquility, letting go of all attachment so as to truly experience the profound truth of the Dharma. The master nodded with a slight smile. Yes, the path of practice begins with the heart. If your heart is full of attachments and you chase mere external forms, you cannot truly comprehend the Dharma. But if you let go, the mind becomes peaceful, and the Dharma will naturally flow into it. Suddenly, it was as if a veil had lifted in Lin Wuchan's consciousness. The confusion and anxiety that had haunted him seemed to dissolve. No longer did he fixate on external counts or fear how others might perceive him. He now aspired only to remain focused on his inner practice, relinquishing all vanity and pride to absorb the deeper essence of the Buddha's name. Determined to make a fundamental change, he returned to the temple and took his meticulously kept practice journal, his scorecard of chanting, and quietly burned it. The flames leapt, seeming to consume all his illusions and perplexities. He ceased counting each recitation and removed the loudspeakers from the temple. In their place, he nurtured a tranquil heart, chanting sincerely, striving to feel the profundity and compassion behind each utterance. Gradually, he shifted his emphasis from quantity to quality. Each time he recited the Buddha's name, he sought to calm his mind, immersing himself in the potency of every Namo Amitabha Buddha, rather than hastily rushing to complete a set number. The Buddha's name was no longer a sequence of meaningless sounds. It became the expression of his most heartfelt devotion and prayer. Day by day, he sensed a significant transformation within. The anxiety and turmoil that once plagued him slowly gave way to quiet and solace. Whether going about daily life or dedicating himself to chanting, his mind grew clearer and steadier. He no longer cultivated for the sake of others' recognition, nor to reach some quantifiable goal. He simply, silently entered into a covenant with the Dharma, seeking the purification and elevation of his own heart. In this process, his chanting shifted from outward display to inner authenticity. Each recitation became a moment of inner cleansing, each repetition a chance to let go of attachment. He realized that the essence of practice is not how fast one proceeds, but how genuinely, how close to the truth, how intimate with it. At last, he came to understand that true cultivation is neither about external forms nor numerical totals, but about inner transformation and elevation. He relinquished every fixation and embraced the compassion and wisdom of the Buddha. Subtly, everything within him began to change. In that moment, his mind was as still water, calm and clear. The chant of the Buddha's name no longer merely passed through his lips. It arose from the depths of his being, filled with warmth and compassion. Though the path of practice was still long and winding, he had finally discovered the genuine way inward. Some years later, he was no longer the hesitant young man wandering the temple corridors. His practice had grown deep and steady in silence, far removed from worldly clamor and vanity. Choosing solitude, he ventured into the mountains in search of an uninhabited haven, devoting himself wholeheartedly to chanting and leading a humble life. Whether at sunrise or sunset, his figure was always found quietly seated on a rock in the mountains, focused solely on chanting, releasing every bit of attachment from his mind, returning to inner peace. The mountain air was fresh, birds sang, flowers blossomed, and streams gurgled. Each day he would sit in meditation, sensing both nature's rhythms and the echo of the Buddha's name. Every chant connected intimately with his very life. These recitations were no longer empty words, but an integral part of his existence. Over time, his practice transcended the personal realm, allowing him to sense oneness with the entire universe. Early one morning, as usual, he sat in the mountains. A gentle chant of the Buddha's name slipped from his lips, drifting on the breeze. That recitation lingered in the air, interwoven with the rustling of trees, bird song, and the scent of flowers, becoming a subtle, invisible energy that spread throughout the valley. There was no dramatic gesture or spectacle, yet in that instant, it felt as though the entire world stilled in response to his chant. Everything found its place within that single sound. In that moment, something seemed to shift in the forest around him. The once tranquil woods now carried a delicate fragrance that refreshed the soul. The green of the trees looked more vibrant, and the air flowed with a warm and mellow resonance, as if all of nature were whispering to him, paying homage to his practice. His heart felt united with the whole cosmos. He was no longer an isolated being, but had merged with the heavens, earth, and all living things. Villagers at the foot of the mountain often caught whiffs of this mysterious aroma. Drawn by a reverent curiosity, they ventured into the mountains. Though few fully grasped his practice, all felt the sacred energy he radiated, as though he had transcended the ordinary level of cultivation and attained genuine awakening. Time flowed on until one day his figure vanished into the depths of the mountains. No one saw him seated on the rock anymore. The forest remained serene and pure, but his meditating presence was gone. A few days later, people found him in a quiet grove. He was seated in stillness, his face wearing a peaceful smile, as though immersed in unfathomable meditative bliss. He had passed away so serenely from this world. Those who remembered him felt awe and gratitude. Once just an ordinary practitioner, he departed this life in completeness and calm, as if he had attained the Buddha realm, reaching the highest level of Bodhisattva insight and transcending the cycle of birth and death. In that serene forest, he had realized the ultimate peace, resonating with the eternity of the universe and transforming into an invisible wisdom, forever imprinted on the mountains and land. His passing became a story repeated by the villagers. Whenever his name arose, they would recall how he had spent his life in that quiet mountain forest, how wearing a peaceful smile, he left so gracefully. His achievements were no longer the stacking of numbers and forms, but the fulfillment and tranquility within. His life reflected the truth of the Dharma itself, gradually merging into every corner of nature, becoming one with all things, eternal and beautiful.